The girl was over the moon when he announced that she was now worth 2.5 times the original price. He argued this cost by the fact that it greatly fueled the interest of the public by appearing at the ball with a diamond. Deborah proudly mentioned that she herself was upset, trying to get used to the role of a sad girl after losing a stone. Hearing her question about who became the buyer, the master replied that it was a collector from another country. This detail made her feel even calmer, since the farther the stone went, the better for her. The master remembered his little trick, since initially Philip Montes offered the highest price. Even Miguel was surprised at the huge amount of money offered by Philip. Isidore waited to answer when he asked whether he would give the stone to Montes or not. In the end, he rejected his offer, passing the right to buy to the next person on the list. Meanwhile, Deborah was peacefully playing with Cookie, not even knowing what favor the man had done her. He knew that Philip would give this diamond to Mia Benocha if he received it, which would greatly harm Deborah. After some time, he showed the girl a chest of jewelry handed over by the buyer. Looking at such an abundance of bright stones, Deborah was over the moon and wanted to hug the master. He couldn't help smiling as he looked at the satisfied face of his business partner. The girl closed the lid of the chest and invited him to move on to discussing their joint project. She clearly knew that their empire was a stratified society, where the unborn aristocrats would always be constrained by rules. Being immersed in her thoughts, she felt distressed by the fact that she would lose her status if she did not marry. Realizing that she urgently needed to earn more money, Deborah pointed to a building in a crowded area of Huron, where she wanted to invest. Having offered her another place near the fountain, the master was refused, arguing that this place was not so attractive. Hearing his statement that mages do not like pastry shops, she nevertheless asked him to look for real estate in this place. Deborah added that she wanted to personally deal with the exterior facade of the building and handed him a sheet with the layout of the future building. The master was delighted with the realization of what a brilliant job the girl had done. To her surprise, he stated that he wanted to take the blueprint, even though it was an unfinished sketch. Seeing his bewilderment about one of the blueprints, she explained that she wanted to offer him to invest in the creation of a merchant guild. She added that this guild will be a legal entity that they will jointly own. In their empire, this was considered commonplace, as many aristocrats considered trade to be an unworthy occupation. Noting the advantages of this idea, Isidore was especially pleased that they would be able to pay less taxes this way. Meanwhile, Deborah continued to gaze at the ceiling, knowing that she had already chosen the location and theme. Less than 6 months later, she decided to disturb her brother by bursting into his office without warning. Meanwhile, after the master's decision, Philip was beside himself with anger, which he was already venting on his subordinate. Being covered with blood from the beatings, he continued to beg him for mercy. It seemed that his plaintive requests only irritated Montes more, after which he grabbed his head with pressure. Ordering him to find the stone at all costs, Philip was distracted by the sound of another servant calling him. Lowering his martyr like a sack of potatoes, the guy muttered in displeasure that his father was already starting to get tired of him. A couple of minutes later, he was already in his father's office, where he immediately began to re-educate Philip. He was clearly beside himself with the fact that his son interfered with the troubles associated with jewelry over and over again. Disgraced by his son's behavior, he contemptuously said that even Miss Seymour was already laughing at him. His father was also angry with him for the pile of crippled servants, on whom he took out his anger over and over again. Philip lowered his gaze in displeasure, clearly disagreeing with his father's opposite position. Hearing the mention of Deborah, he continued to replay her contemptuous comparison of him to a rotten dish. He clenched his fist furiously, somehow expressing his opinion that he was doing this not for Mia's sake, but to laugh right in Deborah's face. Philip's father could not restrain himself and hit his negligent son right in the face, returning to the harsh reality. Calling him a stupid boy, he told him to do as he knew if he wanted to be behind bars. Being in complete prostration, Philip followed his father's demand and agreed with him, asking for forgiveness. Meanwhile, Mia was similarly not in the best position, exposed to the wrath of her nanny. She looked forward indifferently as Ophelia once again expressed her anger at not being the flower of the year. She said that she dyed her hair pink and made everyone think that she was a saint, and now everyone reveres Visconti. Upon hearing this, Mia recalled that she had told the high priest that her holy powers were quite impressive. Like a fury, she burned the girl with her eyes, reminding her of the simple truth that aristocrats like sensations. Ophelia said that this was of no use, since now everyone considers Deborah a more interesting person. The woman angrily dug her nails into her shoulders, accusing her of not giving her anything in return after all she had done for her. Ophelia was so angry that she did not notice how blood gushed from the open wounds and only insisted that it should get better. As if in a trance, Mia remembered her meeting with Deborah and Visconti and felt nausea roll up to her throat. This whole situation only fostered more hatred in the girl towards all these people who had captured her life. The next morning, Bellick decided to ridicule Deborah for losing the pink diamond. The girl immediately deflected his sarcastic remark, showing a new gift from her father. Putting an end to this little squabble, he nevertheless decided to find out why she had called him. Bellick turned white with surprise as she immediately handed him the blueprint with the artifacts he was about to create. At first, he could not understand what kind of thing was depicted on the sheet. He was truly surprised to find out that it turned out that Deborah had drawn it all. After a couple of minutes, he finally understood the true mechanism of action of this structure, equipped with bizarre knives. The girl stared wearily at the guy when he suggested that she had dealt with someone and decided to get rid of the body. Deborah was going to make the main bet on creating freshly squeezed juices with a blender. The girl was excited about her idea, knowing that it would be a real innovation in their world. At first, Bellick was reluctant to respond to her demand, until she threatened him with a contract obliging him to obey her in everything. This condition was stated in one small sentence that simply went unnoticed. Bellick was so struck by his sister's meanness that he felt the ground gradually slipping from under his feet. Using a secret move, Deborah mentioned his little secret, after which he immediately perked up. Pushing him away from her, the girl additionally threw another blueprint at him, similar to the first one. Deborah considered these devices a must, as they would allow her to improve her productivity and increase her income. Finally, she also mentioned that if he wanted to patent these artifacts, he would have to give her 30%. Obviously, he didn't understand her idea of the patent, so she insisted that he listen to her. She was sure that if she opened a franchise, there would be a great demand for this equipment. After finishing her business conversation with her brother, she went to the academy, where she was shocked by so many students imitating Isidore. Deborah clutched her head wearily, not believing her eyes at seeing so many men in pink. As she walked thoughtfully around the academy grounds, she thought again about how well she had chosen the location. Her attention was suddenly attracted by the princess hiding behind the wall, surrounded by her maids. Deborah was struck by the idea that she was hiding from someone. The girl resolutely approached the spy, involving her in a casual conversation about her well-being. She was delighted to hear Deborah say that she had a good sense of someone else's presence. After discussing the issue of attending the conference together, Vanessa decided to gently remind the girl of her promise. Deborah immediately understood what she was getting at, so she said with a smile that she would sign the accession documents after the conference. Trying to maintain decorum, the princess pretended as if she had no intention of rushing Deborah, given her latest tragedy. Before she could thank her for her support, she immediately said that she would not regret joining Upsilon. When she learned that their head had become the flower of the year, she decided to learn about the benefits of this status. Deborah remembered that according to the plot in the novel, Mia won the vote, so she became the most famous lady in town. Thinking for a moment whether she had changed the course of events too much, she nevertheless suggested that the princess go to the conference. Glad that her business was gradually going up, the girl quickly headed towards the academy. Vanessa suddenly stated that being with Deborah was so exciting, as if she were walking next to a wild animal. Feeling that the princess was not of this world, the girl was not very surprised, since she had already dealt with such people before. Deborah was at the door and thought again about how she could have managed to agree to the lecture. To her surprise, Duke Seymour was also at the conference, sitting solidly in the back row. All the colleagues were surprised to realize that he had called them to an urgent meeting, and in the end he had brought them here to show off his daughter. Gathering her will into a fist, Deborah benevolently announced that she was going to tell them about her formula. Everyone was amazed at her openness, believing that no matter how inexperienced she was, she needed to watch her facial expressions. After some time, they were finally convinced that she was good at what she did. Agreeing that it is difficult to find flaws in her performance, one man complimented Deborah's father. They gasped in surprise when they saw that the cold Duke had liked their praise. One of them still decided to stand out and attract his attention by openly complimenting him. Everyone else was outraged by his behavior, thinking that he was trying to outsmart them. Accepting the new course of the game, another professor decided to compete with him using magic. The girl froze in surprise when she heard a sudden burst of applause, magically magnified. After finishing the lecture, Deborah trudged wearily down the hallway, realizing that she would definitely not want to participate in such a thing again. She was unexpectedly greeted by an admiring princess, who asked her if she had heard those thunderous applause. Vanessa openly expressed her admiration for her performance, adding that everyone in the room was in awe of her. Finally, she handed Deborah the contract and was visibly impressed by the attentiveness she showed. Seeing the cherished signature on the document, the girl accidentally stated that now Deborah would definitely not go anywhere. Her eyes flashed dangerously and she held out her hand to congratulate her on joining the club. No sooner had she returned home in the evening than she was besieged by her surprised father. The girl did not understand his indignation associated with her admission, since her father had once studied there. George angrily replied that the problem was with their sloppy leader, not the club itself. After demonstrating his dislike for Isidore, Deborah's father ended the dialogue by saying that he was very tired. Even after leaving his daughter, he still continued to be indignant, not understanding where the world was going at such a pace. Despite all the arguments in favor of this club, George was angry knowing that Isidore had taken the title of Flower of the Year from his daughter. The servant explained that it turned out to be a joke of the Crown Prince, which was supported by all the aristocrats. No matter how he justified the guy, the Duke still showed dislike, finally declaring that it was unseemly for a man to take care of himself like that. He said that people like Isidore were valued only for their handsome face, although he himself was one of the most beautiful people in the empire. Deborah's next day at the academy began again with extreme surprise. She froze in place, dumbfounded, when she saw the huge sign that she had been accepted into the Upsilon. Terry Orgo took her by surprise, sneaking up from behind and asking if she thought the sign was beautiful. Deborah was extremely outraged by the sudden appearance of the guy and such an attempt to wipe the nose of members of other clubs. Seeing the girl's negative attitude, Terry tried to dilute the situation with his frivolous behavior. The guy tried to take her palm in his and introduce himself, but the girl immediately pulled her hand away. Before he had time to talk to Deborah enough, he was immediately caught by an unexpected guy. He furiously accused Terry of fraud, as he lost because of his advice, making the wrong bet. He was forced to leave, but still explained where to find him if she suddenly got bored. The girl did not have time to say goodbye, as she immediately saw a guy running away rapidly. After some time, she again decided to honor the master with her presence, wanting to discuss the details of the business plan. Deborah was delighted with the option he proposed, as the building was distinguished by its spacious rooms. She was extremely surprised to see such a low price based on the subtleties of the location. The master shared a pleasant observation that in this place the flow of people is the same as in the main part. Given this fact, which significantly improves their situation, the girl gave permission to buy real estate. Master Blanche also received permission to donate and establish a merchant guild. After the final choice of the site, he again insisted on discussing the future assortment. Deborah handed him the future menu, upon reading which the master immediately suggested that she put away the coffee. Realizing that she was opening a cafe only to create coffee, the girl convinced him that it was a very popular drink. Deborah named some of the benefits of the drink, which included the invigorating effect, thanks to which she created the formula. The master tried to reject these effects, believing that people would turn to medicines faster and not to an unpalatable drink. He asked how she was going to make coffee, after which she described in detail the entire algorithm of actions. After learning about the intricacies of supplying coffee beans, Deborah came to the conclusion that they simply had poor quality. The man was surprised at how detailed she was asking about the procedure for the supply of grains, not yet knowing what information she possessed. Master Blanche did not know that she had long dreamed of drinking an ice Americano, which did not exist in this world. The girl again singled out cheerfulness as the main advantage of coffee, after which he offered her to conduct an experiment. The next day, Deborah saw Isidore Visconti in a very strange state. All the time he had been touring the Upsilon Club, she had never been able to figure out what was wrong with his face. Noticing that he looked tired, she learned that he had not been able to sleep properly for several days. Vanessa immediately scolded him for such neglect of his health, after which he reminded her of her absences. She deliberately ignored him, again focusing on the excursion. The princess looked at the guy tensely when he said that it was already 3 o'clock, and she still had time to arrive for the beginning of the lecture. She said goodbye sadly, finally surprising Deborah with her sudden touch of hands. Out of the blue, she gently snuggled up to the girl, hugging her goodbye. Deborah looked intensely at the joyful girl clutching her shoulders as she said goodbye. Isidore was extremely dissatisfied, saying that she now had a new admirer. After that, he invited the girl to take a walk, wanting to discuss a couple of things, which made her feel obvious discomfort. Deborah was pleasantly surprised to find herself in a magnificent garden full of purple hues. Isidore looked at her sternly, picking up the delicate petal flying in the air with his fingers. The man with a cunning smile presented her with his gift as a token of gratitude for becoming the flower of the year. The girl looked down at the petal in surprise when it said with amusement that only she could have thought of dressing the gentleman in a pink suit. Embarrassed, she remarked on her decision that it would suit him, which caused him to smile radiantly. She looked at the guy in surprise when he announced the right to choose a chaperone as a gift for him. Deborah couldn't help but be surprised when he added that she should have used it. Gladly noticing her change of mood, he asked if she would accept his proposal. Traditionally, a chaperone was considered a noble lady who helps a young girl to join the high society. Often, the future position of a girl in society will depend on who will become a chaperone. This is the reason why ladies from high society often receive many gifts from different families. Excitedly handing her a special card, he said that he would allow her to make this decision herself. Deborah readily held out her hand, saying that she never refused such gifts. The girl beamed with joy, enthusiastically examining her valuable card, which was a chic thing. Having removed the obsession, she looked at the guy warily, trying to understand why he was suddenly so generous. She held out her hand with interest as he stated that he wanted something in return. Not even knowing what exactly he wanted, the girl froze, feeling his palm touch a strand of her hair. Without any hesitation, Isidore leaned over the girl's face as if he wanted to kiss her. Grinning, he took a fancy flower out of her hair, adding that he wanted to take it. Pressing it to his head, the guy looked at his companion and said that he would keep it for himself. Deborah was so embarrassed by his behavior that she immediately rushed in the opposite direction, saying that it was time for her to go. The girl tried to escape not only from the guy, but also from her thoughts that he could be in love with her. She immediately tried to stop these hopes, knowing that her reputation was disgusting, as was her attitude towards him. Deborah was afraid of rapprochement and disappointment, so she continued to invent that he was pursuing some kind of goal. She froze in surprise when Isidore finally caught up to her, saying that she ran faster than the soldier. He instantly grabbed her by the shoulders and pressed her closer to him, as if he was afraid that she would run away again. Deborah again ordered herself to come to her senses, because she knew that in this novel she was destined to play the role of a villain. Less than 6 months later, the girl met the summer, pleasing her with its warm air. She thoughtfully went through her thoughts about how quickly time passed, because very soon her cafe would open. Imagining how displeased she would be with Master Blanche and Belek, she knew she had no right to screw up. Deborah began to think about options in case of failure in advance, thinking that she would work as a tutor. She purposefully wandered into the library, where she was met by a new librarian. Aaron immediately asked what she was looking for here, and Deborah replied that she was looking for something basic on the theory of mana equations. The girl immediately began to look for the books she needed, which caused a dose of tenderness in Deborah. After the failure of Count Oslot, the position of her family was shaken, but the genius of the girl was noted by many professors. Thus, the girl whom she once saved and made a witness became a librarian in their library. That day, Deborah immediately approached her with a lease agreement, asking directly if she needed the money. She could not allow Belek's henchman to take this position, so she made sure that she took the place. While waiting, the girl's attention was suddenly attracted by a stack of books marked with a note. By the time Deborah read the note, Aaron had already brought the books she needed. She immediately asked who had ordered these 3 volumes, which are not so easy to find by one author. Upon learning that it was Belek, the girl immediately realized that it was no coincidence, since he specifically indicated the authors who have many namesakes. Deborah already understood that in this way he was just trying to survive her in order to put his people in this place. Not wanting to waste time, she turned to the girl and said that since she liked her job, she would make it permanent. Reminding her that she was still on probation, Deborah patted her on the shoulder kindly, telling her to give her all. Charged with motivation, Aaron immediately tried to strain all her convolutions in order to solve a difficult problem. The girl accidentally paid attention to the shelf, thinking that in their empire, books are of the highest value. For this reason, they were forced to be classified by sections, price, and popularity. This gave rise to an urgent need for qualified librarians in order to maintain order. Realizing the benefits of the books, her mind suddenly lit up with an idea, which she hastened to explain to Aaron. Deborah suddenly announced that they should completely change the book accounting system, which at first caused a stupor in the girl. She explained that they should first divide the books by topic and number them, creating a clear list. Next, they need to add other classification criteria by assigning a number to each book. After thinking about Deborah's whole idea, the librarian beamed, realizing how much easier it would be to find books. The girl came closer to Aaron and insinuatingly said that if she developed such a system, everyone would recognize her skill. Seeing the fuse in her eyes, Deborah finally said that she would send her assistants and she should give her all. Climbing the stairs of the 2nd floor of the library, the girl suddenly saw her younger brother reading a book. Enrique felt her gaze and looked into her eyes in fear, inwardly preparing for her new trick. She greeted him softly and sat down a meter away from the boy, knowing that he would run away if she got too close. Deborah eagerly set to work, wanting to create a textbook on equations that even children could understand. The girl also thought out a good marketing campaign, deciding to spread a rumor that it would help to quickly develop her abilities. Despite the good goal, she still thought about becoming even richer, knowing that many would want to buy a copy. Enrique shuddered when he saw that she caught his gaze and looked back at him. The boy was still not used to Deborah's friendly attitude, which made him blush with embarrassment. No sooner had she spoken to her brother than he got up quickly, hastily raking up his things. Unfortunately for him, the persistent Deborah did not allow him to move away, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt. The girl smiled, asking him if he was also interested in her equations. He was surprised when she asked him to explain them, arguing that her discoveries should serve people. Despite her good nature, she still decided not to go out of character and took on a sinister look, talking about her power. Seeing his frightened look, the girl still realized how it looked from the outside, even after she tried to seem kind. After gaining her consent, she turned to Enrique, urging him to sit next to her at the table. The boy nevertheless followed the gentle demand of his sister, after which she solemnly announced the beginning of the lesson. He listened attentively to Deborah as she explained to him the meaning of X, which represented an unknown number. The girl conscientiously continued to explain to him all the subtleties of finding this important mathematical element. After receiving the result of the example, Deborah kindly handed him her pen so that he could solve the second example. The elder sister openly admired how attentively and assiduously her brother was studying, immersed in solving equations. Seeing the decision, Deborah praised him for how quickly he coped, exceeding all her expectations. The girl immediately remembered the process of her training in her previous life, at the same time thinking that it is better to praise children for the process, not the decision. In view of the fact that adults praised her only for the result, soon all parental praise became a burden to her. Having figured out the equations, Deborah suggested that he smoothly move on to the study of fractions, which caused a new surge of interest. After an indefinite amount of time, Deborah finally announced the end of their very fruitful lesson. She was mentally glad that he had finally been caught, agreeing to the offer of a new lesson in the future. Pompously thinking about what time she would find for him, the girl suggested that he meet at the same time. Deborah took the next step to bring them closer together, casually declaring that she would eat his favorite chocolate cake now. Enrique still did not live up to her expectations and quickly ran away, saying that in this case he would go. The girl immediately jumped up, suggesting that he might not like sweets just like her father. Despite a small failure, she was still glad that they were gradually getting closer and acquiring new topics for conversation. Closer to the evening, she decided to seriously deal with the issue of reforming the book accounting system again, which she informed her father. After hearing her father's praise and willingness to send 10 assistants, she also asked for permission to make Aaron an official worker. George gave her his consent, after which he still asked if she had time to rest, given her busy today. Knowing that he would be upset about the truth about the creation of the cafe, Deborah lied, saying that she had been working on the workshop all along. Given the established order, she still agreed that she would tell him everything when she was successful. Meanwhile, everyone was looking at the advertising sign that indicated the imminent opening of Deborah's cafe. Many could not understand why they all preferred to hang such strange posters, but still felt interested. The main concept was to gradually list the components of the restaurant's menu, where each poster differed in a different set of dishes. All those present continued to watch non-stop how actively the advertising campaign was unfolding. They continued to discuss the element that had appeared in the middle of the square, trying to remain patient. Deborah smoothly stirred up interest in the cafe, alternately indicating dishes from the menu, then the name, meaning a pleasant meeting. Finally, after another day, the cherished moment of discovery which everyone had been waiting for came. The night before the opening, Deborah was so nervous that she couldn't even sleep, which was reflected in her appearance. Counting the last minutes before the opening, she was surprised to see a huge crowd of people in front of the main building. All those present actively shared their expectations, trying to predict what would happen there. They were still forced to tear themselves away from the conversation, seeing the waiters dressed to the nines. The guys quickly headed for the main object, which had been hidden from prying eyes all these days. In the end, they saw a magnificent clock tower that surprised everyone with its elegant shape. Deborah enjoyed watching everyone praise this bizarre object, expressing admiration. Finally, the clock made a distinctive sound, marking the beginning of the coveted opening of the establishment. Before everyone had time to rejoice at the opening, the doors to the luxurious building immediately opened in front of them, causing even greater delight. Isidore also came to see to the success of his and Deborah's joint project. The man smiled contentedly, rejoicing at the excellent start as he knew that the girl had been working tirelessly all this time. He remembered especially how enthusiastically she invented the shape of the tower, as if she was making the final touches. Folding his hands in his lap, he assumed that she was happier than ever. Isidore's face lit up with a sincere smile filled with warmth from the feeling that the girl's idea was a success.